So back by popular demand is the whiteboard. We'll see how it goes. We're going to begin a new series this morning. And sometimes the series focuses on a specific arena of life or challenge you might face or an obstacle you may have to overcome or a dream you're pursuing. But this series is going to be very, very specific. We're going to talk about Jesus. We're going to talk about when God walked among us. And over the next several weeks, we're going to focus on the person of Jesus and why Jesus. But that's actually where I want to begin today. Because before we go on a journey and learn about who Jesus is and who he is to us, I want to address the question of why Jesus. One of the basic questions I get from so many people in my life is, okay, I don't even believe in God, but how could you be so specific to believe in Jesus? And I think it's a really fair question. There are so many factors involved in that process. What I want to take you through is my own process, and hopefully it will have some positive effect on you. I want to begin not at the beginning of the story and not at the end of the story, but somewhere in the middle of the story. In John chapter 10, Jesus is talking not just to his followers, but to those who are actually his antagonists. He's trying to paint a picture of why he has come. And then in the middle of it, he says this in verse 9, I am the door. If anyone enters through me, they will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. Now, this imagery is really peculiar in that Jesus was not inside of a building. He was outdoors. You can tell by the narratives, the story, the descriptions he brings. They're looking at sheep and shepherds and fields and pastures. And in the middle of all that, he then says, I am the door, which would be so bizarre to hear that he's the door when you don't even know you're in a room. It's almost as if Jesus was speaking to them about a reality that they were experiencing, but they didn't understand. It's almost as if we're trapped inside of an escape room. And we cannot find our way out. Because you cannot escape the room you do not know you're trapped inside of. But we are trapped inside of an escape room. And the way we experience that, the way we discover that, the way we come to know that, is how our lives tend to cycle back to the same dark and broken places. Have you ever come to a place in your own life where you thought, why does this keep happening to me? Or is this all there is to life? Or is there an escape from sadness? Is there a way out of sorrow? Is there a way through despair? Why do I keep coming back to these same deeply human emotions that reflect my brokenness? It's almost as if we're trapped inside of an escape room. And on the other side of wherever the final door is, there's hope. And there's joy. And there's happiness. And there's forgiveness. And there's life. Oh, and by the way, a part of the problem sometimes is we don't really know what we're trying to get to or where we're trying to find our way through. For me, my early questions were not, is there a God? In fact, I rarely ever meet anyone who says, I woke up this morning with this overwhelming need to know, is there a God? We don't really wake up driven by that question. We wake up driven by other questions, like, is there any meaning to life? Or is there any way to feel fulfillment? Or is happiness just an illusion? Or does real love actually exist? We ask deeply human questions that are actually the questions that are driving us in our search for God. But sometimes we get confused, and before we dive in, I want to make a clarification of why getting out of the escape room is so hard. Because many of us confuse outcomes and process. So let's say, for instance, the outcome you desire is, you don't say it like this, but you want to look good. That's the outcome you really want. You say, I want to get in shape, I want to lose 15 pounds, I want to get ripped, whatever it is. But really what you really say is, I want to look good. I want to look so good that no one even questions whether I look good, right? And so you want to look good, but the process is the problem. Because if everyone could look good, oh, by the way, everyone can, so why doesn't everyone look good? Why don't I look good? Because you see, I think the process is getting healthy. And I don't want to. I want to look good without getting healthy. Now, we don't call it getting healthy. We call it losing weight. We call it doing cardio. We call it doing strength training. We call it suffering. We call it not eating donuts and pizza. All of those are actually really just the choices that distinguish whether you live a healthy or an unhealthy life. Here's a crazy, crazy insight. If you just choose to make being healthy your outcome, the outcome would be that you will look good. But our problem is that we want outcomes and we hate processes. And how does this relate to God? Well, most of us, when we're searching for God, what we're actually looking for, I'm going to use the Bible word for it. We want forgiveness. But really what we want is we want a get out of jail free card, because we all played Monopoly. What we want is we want to be able to do whatever we want to do and then not be held responsible or trapped by the consequences of our choices. Wouldn't that be incredible? And so we want forgiveness as our outcome, but what God says, no, actually, what I want for you, you think is the process, it's called life. See, your outcome should be, I want to live. But your outcome is really, I just want to be forgiven so I can do the things that make me feel alive. But the problem is that things that make you feel alive actually make you dead. And so the things that give you temporary pleasure steal life from you, and the things that actually give you life, they look like punishment. You mean I can't do that? You can. It'll just destroy you. You mean God doesn't allow me to do that? He does actually allow you to. He allows you to do so many stupid things. It's amazing. You can stupid up your life as much as you want. But when you're stupid, you don't get life. All you're actually asking for is forgiveness. So if you're here and you're looking for God to give you forgiveness, you're looking for the wrong outcome. The process is actually the outcome you need. So when God actually tells you, when the scriptures actually teach us, you should do this less and do this more, it's not a punishment. It is actually the escape route that leads you to life. All right, so that's just the backdrop. That has nothing to do with this talk. It has everything to do with how we think. And so if Jesus is inviting us to follow him out of an escape room that traps us in hopelessness, in existence, in meaninglessness, in despair, in emptiness, and loneliness, but we keep thinking that the things we're holding on to are going to give us what we long for, we're going to stay trapped. So how do we get from where we are to Jesus? Like, why, of all the options, Jesus? For me, the journey really begins with a more basic question. I have so many friends who are atheists, or at least they say they are. And so the first divide I want to kind of walk through is you have to kind of look and decide, do you believe in a universe where there is a God, or do you believe in a universe where there is no God? Pretty straightforward, right? Now, I do have friends who tell me I'm an atheist. Whenever you add the word "a" in front of a word, it means without. So atheist without God. So when someone tells me they're an atheist, I usually say or ask, how can you be an atheist without the knowledge of there not being a God? Because if you don't know whether there's a God or not, that's not being an atheist. That's being an agnostic. And so if you say you're an atheist, you're saying you actually know there's no God. But I don't think you can know there's no God. There may not be a God, but you can't. In fact, if there is no God, you can't know that because you cannot prove something that doesn't exist. So the one thing I know you can't know is that there's no God. You believe there's no God, which actually is an act of faith. And so what that makes you then is an agnostic. And in fact, I was just on a podcast with an atheist, and on the podcast, we had this great conversation. He goes, well, I guess I'm an agnostic. And so let's talk about that. Because being an agnostic means that gnosis means you don't know. But you seem pretty smart. There are some things I think you do know. I think there are things you know that you don't even know you know. So I don't know if you're an agnostic without knowledge. I think you have some knowledge, but maybe that knowledge doesn't actually help you conclude there's a God. He goes, well, no, that's exactly where I'm at. I mean, I know there's some things I know, but I don't know if there's a God. I don't know if there's not a God. I said, well, there's kind of two kinds of atheists. One is the atheist or the agnostic. Two kinds of agnostic. One is the person who says, I don't care if there's a God. I don't want to know. Or the agnostic who says, if there was a God, I'd love to know. Which one are you? He goes, well, I'm not the agnostic that says I don't care. I'm the agnostic that says if there is a God, I'd love to know. I said, then you're not an agnostic. You're a seeker. And he goes, what's that? He lit up. I said, you're a seeker. You're not an agnostic. And an agnostic is a person who says, I don't know, but I don't care. There's no point in pursuing this. There's no way of knowing. But if you're a seeker, then you're exactly who Jesus says you should be. Because Jesus said, if you seek, you will find. He goes, oh, I love that. I'm a seeker. And the wonderful thing about a seeker is he's learned his first way out of the escape room. Because now you're willing to search for truth. But when you conclude there's no God, there are certain things you should accept. See, I'm not one of those people that thinks that no matter what we believe, we all believe the same thing. In fact, these guys came to me one time and said, well, it's all the same, right? I said, no, it's not all the same. It's not all the same because I have too much respect for you to pretend that what you're saying is what I'm saying. We should respect each other. And when someone says they're Muslim, you should accept that. When someone says they're Buddhist, you should honor that. When someone says they're atheist, you should respect that. We should actually be able to talk to each other from our actual belief systems, not pretending that it's all the same. So if there's no God, and what's interesting to me is that the international research from scientific determinism is the most insightful community in the world to me, because what they tell us is if there's no God, everything is mathematical. So it's all math. And so we're inside of this ever-expanding universe that's completely mathematical, and you're just a digit. You're not really a human, you're just a digit. You're just a digit with a level of consciousness that makes you aware that you exist, which makes you very nervous. But you're just a digit. It's all just math. 2 + 2 = 4, and then add some physics. And so when there is no God, it's all math, which means, by the way, the universe is fatalistic. Which means it's all set. It's predetermined. You can't do anything about it. But I hear a lot of people who believe in God talk like that. See, I think a lot of people who believe in God actually have the same framework as people who believe there's no God. Because when you say, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen, that's this. You're fatalistic. Anybody say that? If it's meant to be, it's going to be. That's fatalistic. Everyone who's supposed to be here is here. You ever say, if I'm supposed to get that job, I'll get that job? That's pure fatalism. There's really nothing I can do about it. I'm just a digit in this mathematical code of the universe, and it's going to happen whether I want it to happen or not. So I don't believe I'm a digit, so that makes it a little bit harder. When people say to me, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen, I say, why don't we make it happen? Let's try something else. But anyway, just moving on. So if you believe there's no God, you not only are fatalistic, you also believe that there is no spirituality. Because if everything's mathematical, spirituality is just an illusion of our consciousness. There is actually nothing transcendent. We're just a part of the dust. But we're just really, really advanced, interesting dust. But there's no spirituality, which makes sense if you believe there's no God. But on top of that, and a lot of us can live without spirituality. But it also means there's no creativity. Because if the universe is mathematical, if it's all deterministic, not only is it not spiritual, it's not creative. You are not a creative being if there's no God. It's just an illusion of creativity. It already is predisposed to happen. It's already predetermined. When you wake up in the morning and you think you're actually creating, you're not. You're just conforming. You're just a conforming unit of math. And then if there's no God, there's no free will. Which I think is really interesting, that scientific determinism actually concludes that there is no free will. Free will is an illusion. That choice you made this morning, you didn't make it. You were just a 4 after the 2 plus 2. You thought you were choosing, but you're not. And so every action really has, oh, by the way, it becomes an amoral universe. Because if you don't have free will, you're not responsible for your choices. There is no right or wrong. There is no good or bad. You're just the domino that is acting on the basis of the last domino that acted on the basis of the last domino that set everything into motion. So you don't have any moral responsibility. And by the way, I'm just going to add this one. This is not from the scientific determinism. This is from me. There's actually no fun. Because you can't really have fun if you don't have choice. You cannot enjoy life and have fun if there's no free will. You're just living in an illusion. So when I looked at this, and when I was early in my journey, I wasn't sure which direction I was going to go. I thought, okay, I can live with the fact that there's no God, and I can live with the fact there's a God. I just kind of like to know or decide. And I have to be honest with you, early on in my journey, if you believed in God, I would argue with you that there was no God. And if you did not believe in God, I would argue with you that there was a God. It was just fun. I didn't actually have a position. I just wanted to see how far a person could hold their position. But when I moved in this direction, how I experienced reality felt suffocating to me. I didn't want to exist in a world where I was just math, where everything was fatalistic, where there was no spirituality, where there was no creativity, where there was no free will. And in some sense, I didn't even want to live in a world that was amoral. Because I felt that human beings had a moral responsibility, one for each other. But then I looked at the opposite side. All right, if there is a God, it tells me that the universe is, by the way, it is mathematical, so I don't want to say there is no math. But the driving principle of the universe, if there's God, is love. What drives the universe is not simply math, it's love. In fact, what the scriptures tell us is that everything that's created was created as an act of love, that the driving principle of the entire universe is love. And this is why human beings are inherently relational, and why you will not spend your life searching for math. You will spend your life searching for love. That reality is not fatalistic, that it's dynamic. You act on reality. You're not just inside of reality, you're a creator of reality. And the choices you make actually create the future you'll experience. You're a dynamic force in creation. And so you can actually decide when the universe says 2 plus 2 equals, you can go 4.3, sucker, take that. Because the universe is dynamic and you are an active agent on reality. Which is because the universe is spiritual. that everything is spiritual, that you are a spiritual being, whether you believe in God or not. And by the way, this idea that everything is spiritual seems so like mystical and non-scientific until they realize that everything is energy. Because there was a time where we believed that energy and matter were two distinct different things. Now we know that matter is simply how energy acts when it loses momentum. How do you act? More like matter or more like spirit? Because when you lose momentum, you act more like matter. But when you have energy, you act more like spirit. Oh, but also when you believe in God, you believe the universe is creative. And I do. See, I am convinced every human being is a creative agent. That you're designed to create. That's why you have an imagination. Your imagination is that unique composition of your consciousness that allows you to create into the material reality what only exists in your imagination. How else can you define a creative being except you can create something out of nothing? Some of us are just less creative than others because we've given up on our spirituality. So we're not making a dynamic impact on the universe. And then, by the way, if God exists, we have free will. Oh, I should have put over here, no free will. If God exists, you are not only capable of making choices, you are responsible for the choices you make. Which means that the universe is then moral. Which is why we don't really like God. See, if we could have no God with all of these things, without this, we would trade these in an instant. But we would rather give up a universe that's dynamic, spiritual, creative, where we have freedom, so that we would not have moral responsibility. But when there is a God, he's a relational God. He holds us responsible for how we treat each other. Oh, and by the way, when there's God, again, this one I'm adding, life becomes fun. So I just want to look at it objectively. Oh, come on, if one person's going to applaud, you got to So you get to make your own choice because, see, I believe you have free will. So you have agency. So you're allowed to choose there's no God. But you don't get to actually choose the reality of that view of reality. You can't go, oh, there's no God, but there's a moral system. There's not. If there's no God, there is no right or wrong. There is no good or bad. You can't say to someone, murder is wrong. Stealing is wrong. Having people dying in poverty is wrong. All of that is what exists in an amoral reality. Oh, by the way, it looks like the one we live in. So maybe what's happening is the people who say they believe in God are actually choosing to live in an amoral system. And why people stop believing in God is because we don't actualize this reality. Okay, let's move on. So we work out of the first room of the escape room, moving from no God to God. And hopefully many of you can go there with me. If there wasn't a God, there should be. Because the world makes sense when there's a creator. And we make sense with a creator. How in the world could we ever think that we could move to a level of consciousness without a consciousness that created us? Why would we create the idea of God if there is no God? The idea of God itself goes beyond our experience if there's no God. Why would we think about transcendent things beyond time and space? How would we even be aware of the existence of anything beyond time and space? How could Inception be made into a film if there's no God? Just thought I'd throw that out there. All right. So then we go, okay, I'll accept that there's a God. The view of reality with a God makes more sense than the view of reality without God. But then how do you get to Jesus? Because if you have God, and then you have us. Yes, my left leg is shorter than my right leg. And then you have this great divide between us and God. The dilemma of the escape room is, how do I get out of here to here? Because we don't search for God, we search for everything we hope God can bring, like hope and joy and love and meaning and life. Because somehow attached to this concept of God are all these things all of us long for and are searching for and cannot seem to find outside of God. So it's the perfect sting for religion. Religion is how humans control other humans in our desperate need to escape the escape room. And it doesn't matter which religion. They'll change words. Get to God, get to Allah, get to enlightenment, get to nirvana, get to heaven. They'll change the language, but it's all the same intent. There's somewhere, someone, someplace that you need to get to that you cannot get to. So then you have religions like Buddhism. Oh no, that looks more like Islam. Okay, like Islam that says, here are the things you need to do to get to God. But we don't know if you've done it enough. And only God knows. So you're sort of trapped in here trying to do the things that will get you to God. I remember one time talking to this very devout Muslim man. I really liked him a lot. And I said, do you believe in Allah? And he said, yes. And I said, does Allah promise you a place with him? And he said, well, only Allah knows. I said, can you know in your lifetime whether Allah will accept you? He goes, no, only Allah knows. I said, well, what does Allah expect of you to do so that you can actually be with Allah? And he said, I need to be a good man. And I said, well, how's it going? And he said, it's very hard to be a good man. And this is the problem, that you kind of know that if Allah is God and Allah is perfect and you have to get to God, anything less than perfection leaves you trapped in the escape room. And then you have the two pillars that were started around Jesus, Catholicism and Christianity. And they did the same thing. They created systems that tell you this is what you do to get to God. And what happens, though, is that it's never enough. It doesn't matter if you do penance. It doesn't matter if you crawl up and down stairs. It doesn't matter if you go to confession. You just never know if you've done enough. But you got to hope you can do enough. And then inside of each one says, well, we have the system that will get you to God. And if you do what we tell you, you might get to God. I remember when I went through my first confession. I went through confirmation as a Roman Catholic. I was around 10 years old. I had never been to Mass, but my mom thought we should, hedge our bets. And so they took me through summer catechism. I learned all the stuff. And then it was my turn to have my first confession. And I needed to have this first confession if I was ever going to get to God. And they told me that the priest wouldn't know who I was and that they would not talk to my parents, but I didn't believe that. I believed that priests and parents were in it together. It was their way of trapping you. And I remember going into that confessional, and I looked through that little beaded thing, and I looked at him and said, I can see you. And he was looking forward, but I didn't factor that. And he goes, yes, but I'm not looking at you. And I said, no, but you can see me. You probably recognize my voice, too. And I was supposed to say, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. This is my first confession. Why? Because that first confession will help me get to God. Just as catechism and confirmation and baptism and everything else. And I remember that priest said, my son, tell me your sins. And I was hesitant. So I gave it a shot. I said, I'm doing really good. I don't have any. And I just thought, he's going to be really impressed. We're going to be good. I didn't know I needed to be sinning so that he could have a job. Because he would have a huge unemployment issue with priests if you have nothing to confess. And so I said, I don't have any sins. I'm doing really, really good. And I'm on a roll, let my mom know. And it wasn't me. And it was my brother. And he got really upset when I said I didn't have any sins. I didn't realize it was a requirement. And then a sin kind of exploded in my mind when I had committed consciously. I said, I can think of a sin. He goes, okay, my son. I said, I'm not telling you. Because I tried to run away from home. I got caught, got locked into a room, and I screamed at God, God, you're so stupid. I think I was specific. I wanted to mail it in. I said, Jesus, you're so stupid. I was not going to tell a priest who worked for Jesus that I told Jesus he was stupid. That was all the profanity I could pull up at 10. And so I couldn't tell him, and then so he got mad, and he gave me like 350 acts of contrition, 400 Hail Marys, and 300 Lord's Prayers. Like a lot, like over 1,000 prayers. I was going to have to go into that cathedral and pray those prayers. And the only thing is that I actually never learned the act of contrition and never learned the Hail Mary. I faked it all. But I did accidentally learn the Lord's Prayer, which later I discovered was actually in the Bible, so I thought that was very cool. So I went to the front of that cathedral, and I said, God, you know me. I'm not going to pray all those prayers. It's just not going to happen. Yeah, it's like, I said, but this is what I'll do, because I was negotiating, and I said, God, I'm going to pray 3 times, once for you, Father, once for you, Jesus, and once for you, Spirit, and I hope I got you covered. And so I prayed that 3 prayers, and then I left, hoping that it would get me there, but I knew it didn't get me there. And Christianity does the same thing. It tells you, give your life to Jesus, then do this, then do this, then do this, then do this, and you're always wondering if it's enough. And Buddhism, even though they're more elegant, they tell you, no, you're going to get to enlightenment, right? And what they don't tell you is, it's really hard. Because, you're reincarnated in one life, and then reincarnated in one life, reincarnated, you're almost getting there, and then you're a dog. And, it's and then you're doing better, you come back, and you're reincarnated, then you come back as like a snake or a rat, a roach, something, and then you just reincarnate, you come back as a Republican. And I'm just kidding, okay? I do want you to know the reason I didn't say Democrat is you guys don't have a sense of humor. But, did I cover everybody? Okay. And because you're a capitalistic American, you turned reincarnation into a benefit. I used to be Marie Antoinette, right? It's like you're always someone famous. You never say I was Lassie, in a past life or something like that. But for Buddhists, it's an endless, painful cycle, repetitive cycle of being trapped until you move toward nothingness. And so I looked at those and I thought, those don't work for me. And I work from a process of elimination. And one of the things I look for is what is the consistent theme among every belief system, whether it's a religion or a philosophy. And when I was in college, I would actually go and spend time with people in different religions. Now, I would actually go into the homes of people who had different philosophies, different religions, because I wanted to experience their world, wanted to understand it. And one of the things I began to discover is that there is a constancy between every religion and every philosophy. This is what you need to do to get to where you need to go. And God is a passive observer of reality and couldn't care less, really, if you get there. So I looked at the world and I thought, every religion that tells me that God is more powerful than me and that tells me that connecting to God is on me is really malevolent. Because if God is the all-powerful one and I'm powerless, then he should be the one coming to me, not the one expecting me to get to him. And this idea that God is like this sage on top of this mountain, watching us trying to work our way up to him, and then failing and working our way to him, and then failing and then trying to get to him, and then failing. And then he judges us for an inadequate effort to get to him. Is an evil, malevolent, dark, and untrustworthy God. And then I heard the story of Jesus. And it was different than every other story I'd ever heard. You see, if there is a God, and that God is defined by love, and that God is all-powerful, and all-loving, and all-present, then there's a different reality taking place. God isn't some distant place that we need to attain to. God is ever present with us where we are. He's not on the other side of the escape room. He is inside the escape room, offering us a way to freedom. And then the words of Jesus made sense to me when he said, I am the door. We're all trapped inside of this escape room, trapped inside of our brokenness, trapped inside of our inadequacy, trapped inside of our sorrow and sadness and loneliness and emptiness. And we keep hoping that if we can get to God, we can get our way out of this escape room to life and love and hope and meaning. And what God says, no, everything ever designed to try to get you to me is a lie. What I've done is everything necessary to get to you. And that's why Jesus has come. Because instead of waiting for us to get to him, Jesus came to get to us. Because the one who is the more powerful one is the one who must act to save the weaker one. The one who is the source of love has to act to save the one who's desperate for love. Any religion or any philosophy that ever tells you that you have to do these things to earn God's love is a lie. It is deceptive and it is destructive to your soul. Jesus is the only narrative. He's the only one who said, you don't have to do anything to earn my love. You don't have to get to me. I have come to you. And it always bothers me that Jesus mixes metaphors. He does. He says, I'm the shepherd and the gate. But now he's both the door and the one knocking at the door. He says, I am the door, and if you will come through me, you will come in and out of me and enter green pastures. What he's saying is you're going to move to wide open spaces. He says, I feel the suffocation of your soul. I know that you're trapped and cannot find a way out, but I want you to know that if you'll trust me and come through me, I will be that door that will set you free. But then in Revelation chapter 3, verse 20, he says, oh, by the way, I am the door, but I stand at the door and I knock. And if anyone hear my voice and open the door, I will come into them and I will have fellowship with them. What is Jesus actually telling us? Because the driving principle of the universe is love, God will not force himself on you. Because love can only be freely chosen. Some of you are like, oh, if God's out there, why does he just fix everything? Because God is love. And so he doesn't impose himself on you because you're created out of love for love. And the only way the world will ever get fixed and become an expression of his heart is if we allow his love to change us. And when his love changes us, we finally understand our reason for being. You're created because love always expands. You're here because God refuses to give up on you. You have a choice because love cannot be imposed. It can only be offered. And 2,000 years ago, God stepped into human history. He entered the escape room to show us the way to freedom. He lived a sinless and perfect life. He walked toward Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, knowing that his life would be taken, but they did not know that his life would be given. He allowed himself to be beaten and mocked and crucified, buried, so that on the third day, when he conquered death, you would never have to doubt whether he has the power to raise you from the dead and give you life. That door that you're looking for is just a breath away. That eternity you're searching for, it's not out there, it's in here. That heaven that you long for, it's not out there, it's in here. That freedom you long for, it's not out there, it's in here. And the God who created you doesn't want to be out there to you. He wants to be in here. And he's knocking at that door. And he waits for you and for me to say, I'm done with the escape room. What if God put us in this escape room and we thought the keys to the doors were hidden in some kind of desk or drawer, a religion, a philosophy, a belief system? But all along, he was in that room with us, just waiting for us to trust him to show us the way to freedom. I am here because I was lost in that escape room. And Jesus became that door. He became the guide who set me free. And that's why he's here for you. Would you bow your heads with me just for a moment? Just close your eyes. Just take a moment. Perhaps let God speak to you personally, intimately, specifically. If you're here and you've never crossed the line of faith, you've never put your trust in Jesus, you've never given him your life, and you know you're still trapped in the escape room, but somehow today you know that Jesus is the door that you've been searching for. He's actually knocking at that door, hoping you'll open it, because it's locked from the inside out. But now you're ready to receive his forgiveness. You're ready to receive his love. You're ready to receive his life in you. Then just pray this simple prayer. Jesus, I give you my life. Right now, just tell him, Jesus, I give you my life. Jesus, I give you my life. If this is your prayer, I want to pray for you. If you just whispered that simple prayer, Jesus, I give you my life, I just want you right now, with all the courage you have, just raise your hand so I can see you. And I want to pray for you right now. Beautiful. All around the room. Anyone else? Beautiful. All around the room. Anyone else? This is your moment. Jesus, I give you my life. Father, I thank you for each person that in this moment has opened up their life to you. I thank you that you're the God who has come for us. That love is worth fighting for, but love never stops fighting who they love. I pray, God, that each person who prayed that simple prayer would just sense your presence. They would just be wrapped up in your love, and that they would know you will never leave them or abandon them, that they belong to you, that this is the beginning of an eternity of love with you. I thank you, Jesus, that you came and you died for us, that you rose from the dead. I thank you that you entered the escape room to show us the way out to freedom. I thank you that you did not hesitate to give up your life for me and for each one of us. I thank you that you rose from the dead and that you are here in this moment, waiting for us to trust you. You are such a patient and beautiful and loving God. We thank you. We pray in your name. Amen. Can we just thank God for everyone who responded to him right now? So good. So good. This is the beginning. We're going to journey together for the next few weeks, looking at Jesus and seeing why he's worthy of your life and your trust. I'm going to invite Pastor Joe to come. Love you guys.